Mike Browning of Nocturnus. Welcome to 69 Faces of Rock. How are you doing today?
All right, how you doing, Mark? I'm doing good.
Good to see you again. It took, what, 5 years for the new album Unicursal to surface. What have you been doing all this time?
Well, I think the big thing was COVID. You
Okay.
know, I, when we put out the album, of course, nobody knew what was going to happen with COVID. And as soon as we put the album out, COVID started, and it, in the beginning, it was really bad. Nobody was on the streets. Nobody could leave their houses. So, and that went on for months and months and months. So everything just stopped.
Mhm.
We had some festivals booked. We had some really good shows. We were just starting to write new songs, and then bam, COVID hit, and basically, like 2 years of everyone's lives were just ruined.
That makes
So, if you take that out of it, it probably was, would have been maybe 3 years instead of five.
which is
You
a
know,
little
the,
fair.
But yeah, it took a little while. But the thing was with us is we only practice once a week, so we only get together once a week, and we don't write until we're together. So when we practice once a week, and if somebody misses a practice, then that's 2 weeks, and 4 times a month is not a lot of practicing for a band. So back in the old days, we used to practice 4 or 5 days a week. So now, because of everybody's lives and things, we only get together on Saturdays, and sometimes that doesn't even happen, or not everybody shows up always on Saturdays. So after COVID, we were trying to get things back together, and then you got holidays where people are gone, and so sometimes when you do that, it's not a lot of time to write, and we write together in the warehouse, in the rehearsal room, I should say, where we practice. So the whole album was written in the rehearsal room.
So I guess
And
my actually next question would be, what does your life look like nowadays outside of being involved in music?
well, I have a job with the city of Tampa, and the water department, and so it's a really good job, and I've been there 31 years.
Mhm.
So I'm getting, and believe it or not, I'm getting close to retiring. So once I do retire, in about 4 years or so, I'll be able to do whatever I want full time. But I still have, my regular job. I have a real house, that I own, and I have a daughter that's 17, and I have a pretty busy regular life on top of that.
Pretty much
So that
same now.
yeah, I think the older you get, the more responsibilities come into life,
Mhm.
and you have to do these things, called life, to live. I didn't want to be like 50 years old and living in my mom's house still. Yeah, so I've been on my own since I've been like 18.
That makes a lot of sense, and I know firsthand how tough it is to balance it all.
Yeah, it really is. I try to do the best that I can, and plus, having a good job means you can't just leave and go whenever you want. So we can't do a lot of touring either, which is a bad thing. But we try to do the best shows that we can. That's why we don't play a lot, but we try to do. Luckily, because I have been in some other bands and done things in my life for a long time, that I can get on festivals and things like that, and we can go play a really big show on a weekend, and then not miss a lot of work, and come back and do that a few times a year.
That
So
makes
instead of doing like a big long 2 month tour, which we none of us can really do that. So it's kind of like we try to pick the best things that we can do with the amount of time that we have.
that does make sense. So when writing for Unicursal, what did you have in mind? Did you have like a plan where you wanted the music to go?
Yeah, I did in some ways, but then I always want to keep a lot of openness to everything. So like with Paradox, it continued the key story with the last four songs on the record. So again, I wanted to do that for sure. So right there, the second half of the record was already set up to be the story of the key continuing. And the first side of the record, I wanted to continue with Mesolithic, which was a continuation of Neolithic. So you had Neolithic, you had Mesolithic, and now Paleolithic was on was on Paradox. So I wanted to do Mesolithic, which is the next period in time on Unicursal, and I kept it the third song on every record. Like on the key, Neolithic is the third song. On Paradox, Paleolithic is the third song, and on Unicursal, Mesolithic is the third song. So I kept that kind of going like that, and then the second half of the album was the Dr. Mage's Key Story, and then I took a couple other songs of stuff that I like personally, like I'm really into Egyptian stuff, so I wrote the Ascension Throne of Osiris as the opening song, and then we had Cephalogod, which was a Cthulhu song, and I'm big time into Lovecraft stuff, and then we had, of course, Mesolithic, and then the fourth song was Organism 46B, which was a story I saw on the internet about a Russian Antarctic exploration team that found this weird creature, and there was a story from one of the survivors of the team. It ended up not being a real story, but they presented it at first like a real story. So when I read it, I was like, wow, this if this is real, it's a lot like the movie The Thing.
Oh.
But then I realized I did some more research on the whole situation, and the guy that was writing it from the exploration team, the scientist and everything, and found out the whole thing was fake. So it was like, darn, too bad that this isn't real, but it still was a really cool story. So I was like, I still want to write a song about it.
Good enough for a song, right?
Yeah, it made a great song. So
Care to explain the concepts that kind of unite some of your records lately? Like a little
I think
storyline?
that's basically, you mean the Key Story is on, well, it on the Key, it was it didn't really start as a concept. Actually, Mike Davis wanted to do a song called Andromeda Strain about the movie, the 1970s movie Andromeda Strain. So he gave me the song title, and he did that one in Droids. It was his idea because he liked the Transformers a lot too. So the droid sector came kind of from Transformers. But he gave me some lines of lyrics, and then I wrote the rest of all the lyrics and fit it into the song and everything. And Andromeda Strain kind of told a story. And then we did Droid Sector, and it told another story, but it was a different kind of story. But I kind of was like, these two stories could connect to each other. So I came up with the Destroying the Manger song, and so I connected that to the other two songs kind of loosely. And then Empire of the Sands was a real connection to Destroying the Manger. I was like, I want to continue Destroying the Manger. So we wrote Empire of the Sands, and that continued Destroying the Manger. So when it came to Paradox, well, we didn't do it on Thresholds. Nothing on Thresholds connected back to the key.
Mm-hmm.
And that's basically because I didn't sing on Thresholds, and I didn't do hardly any of the writing of the lyrics. So that Thresholds was a totally different album than the key, in the fact that everybody was wanting to write songs and trying to say, oh, I wrote this, so I want to get paid more. I wrote this, so I want to get paid more. And it was like, this is terrible. This is turning into a corporation, not a band. But so when I did Paradox, I was like, I always wanted to continue the Key Story, even though it was a loose story of those 4 songs on the key. It still made a story. So I was expecting to do that on Thresholds, and it never happened. So when we did Nocturnus AD, because when I was in After Death, we were doing a lot of the key songs in our live set. And then Maryland Death Fest wrote us and said, we want you to play Maryland Death Fest, but we want you to play the whole Key album. Can you do that? And I said, yeah, we could definitely do that. So we went to Maryland Death Fest, played the whole Key album back to back, just like it is on the CD. And it went over very well. So when that happened, I was like, we need to continue this. so with Nocturnus AD, I went ahead and started continuing the key story again with again the last 4 songs on the record.
That makes sense.
So
So physically, how did Nocturnus AD came to be?
well, it was like basically it was kind of like everybody was seeing us play the Nocturnus stuff live in After Death. And After Death, I wanted to be different than Nocturnus, but everybody kept saying it's like, when you go see Ozzy's band, he will always play at the end Paranoid or Iron Man. He always plays a Black Sabbath song at the end. So I thought, well, we started playing, a song or two off the key when we do After Death shows. And then people were like, man, you guys got that old Nocturnus sound when you play the Nocturnus songs. So we're like, okay, so we started switching songs up from the key and playing more and more of them live. And so many people came to me and said, man, you really need to redo this again. It's been a long time. The other guys aren't doing anything. You really need to do, Nocturnus again. So I knew I couldn't use the name. So I went with the Nocturnus AD and decided to continue the key story. And it just kind of grew from there. Once we put out Paradox, it kind of exploded bigger than I thought it would be. So, and a lot of people really liked the fact that it sounded like the key and was a continuation of it. So I kind of knew I was on the right track then when that happened, and when we did Unicursal, I wanted to just keep going with it, just keep moving with it.
That makes complete sense. So from your point of view, what initially happened with the original Nocturnus?
The original? Well, I mean, it goes back to 1987. The original Nocturnus was me, Richard Bateman on bass, and Vincent Crowley on guitar from Acheron.
That's really, really original. I'm thinking more like around Threshold time, like once you stop being in the band, all of that mix up.
Well, I mean, it started really with Earache saying we needed a front man. Mm-hmm. When it came to Thresholds, and we actually had a song or two, Grid Zone was already written. When we were touring with the key, we played Grid Zone a few times and I was singing it. So I thought I was going to be singing on Thresholds. And then Earache said, look, you need a front man. You're behind this big drum set. Nobody can see you. The guitar players aren't moving around a lot. The keyboard player, stuck behind the keyboard. So you need a focus, some that the crowds can focus on. So either you sing and quit playing drums or play drums and get a singer. And I didn't really want to do that. But everybody else was like, oh, we could be really big. It's like Dream Theater was a big band at the time. And so Earache said, all right, if you don't get a front man, we're going to cut your budget and we're not going to give you a video, because MTV just had Headbangers Ball, was just getting started. And they told us we were going to be able to do a video that they could probably get on Headbangers Ball. Well, they're like, well, if you're singing and playing drums, we're not going to do a video, and we're not going to give you the budget that we were going to give you for the second record unless you get a vocalist. So it basically was 4 people in the band wanted to get a vocalist and I didn't. So I was like, and the thing with the Earache record contract was we all individually signed it. So we were all obligated to the label, not just the band, but each one of us. So when it came down to the decision, it was 4-1 that we were going to get a vocalist. So we got a vocalist and everybody started writing lyrics. Everybody started writing more parts to the songs. And Thresholds was much more of a collaboration between the whole band rather than, basically Mike Davis writing most of the riffs. Now it was like everybody was throwing in riffs. Everybody was throwing in words because they all were talking, oh, if I write this, I'll get paid more. And we could be the next Dream Theater if we go more commercial and this and that. So that's why Thresholds was completely different from the key. It was everybody in the band got this concept in their head that we were going to be the next Dream Theater, but we had to get rid of the satanic thing and be more commercial and this and that. And so I was just like, you know what? we're under contract. I have to do what the label wants to do. And I just went along with it. And I said, well, let's see what happens, you know? So I sat back, I played drums, I didn't sing. And Thresholds came out and it sold 1/3 of what the key sold.
Mhm. Wow.
After that happened, I found out that the keyboard player had went behind my back and trademarked the name. And I never trademarked the name because I didn't think, because back then you had record stores everywhere. Our album was out. We had a record contract. I said, nobody's going to use the name Nocturnus now. You know, we have records out. So I didn't think I had to. Well, nobody else could have actually stole the name from me, but somebody in the band. You know, another Nocturnus couldn't have come out after we put out 2 albums.
No.
So I thought I was safe. And then all of a sudden, you know, we do a tour for Thresholds and come back, and everybody's looking at me going, "Oh, I think we're going to get rid of you and get another drummer." And at the time, I was going to play in Asheron anyway. I was going to do the drums for the next album for Vince, because I knew Vince from the original Nocturnus. And so Vince asked me if I would play drums on the next Asheron record, and I was still in Nocturnus at the time. So I said, okay, you know, that's no problem. I can do that. I got plenty of time. I wasn't working at the time. I had quit my job because we were touring. And I thought, well, doing another band actually could help my income. So I thought, yeah, I'll play drums on the Asheron record. And I'm still in Nocturnus, just playing drums now. So I don't have that much to do but play drums. So, you know, when I came back and the keyboard player said, I own the name now, and Earache is behind us, and you know, you're out of the band now. And I'm like, what? I started the band. This is my name. He goes, not anymore. It's my name now. And I didn't know what to do, because I was a kid. I didn't have the money to hire a lawyer and fight them in court, and they had the label behind them.
Yeah.
So I fought. Then I come to find, so I was like, okay, whatever. The band was falling apart at the time already. When we were on tour on Thresholds, I woke up one morning and Mike Davis and Lou, the keyboard player, were outside of the tour bus, fighting on the ground, punching each other, rolling around on the ground. And I'm like, this is not a band anymore.
No.
You know, it became like a job. And I never wanted a band to be a job.
Sure.
You know, I wanted a band to be something fun that you do. And they were arguing every day over money and this and that, and who was going to make more money than the others in the band, because they heard, like, you know, when they heard bands like Morbid Angel don't split their money. I'm always fair. When we play a show, everybody gets paid the same amount of money.
Which is fair.
You know, when we get album royalties, everybody gets paid the same amount of money. I always did that. I didn't want, oh, I wrote the lyrics, so I get 50% of everything right off the bat. I could do that, but I don't want to do that. It's not right to me. But I understand it, because it's a business to a lot of people.
Yeah.
And I know Morbid Angel was doing that. Trey and David were making all the money, and Pete and Richard weren't making a lot of money compared to Trey and David. So the keyboard player in Nocturnus saw that, and he's like, oh, I can make a lot more money if I do this and if I do that. So he wanted control over the band so he could make all the money. And that's basically what happened with Thresholds. So after they fired me, I joined Asheron the very same day. And I was in Asheron the same day, because I was going to do it anyway. And then Earache said, you know, what I found out was they told me Earache was behind them in firing me, but they weren't. So, you know, you didn't have the internet back then. You didn't have cell phones. So I couldn't just, you know, pop up on my cell phone and email or call Earache. I had to go on a phone and spend a whole bunch of money trying to talk to them on the phone, because, you know, it was really expensive to call Europe back then. And I found out that Earache didn't know anything about them firing me. And Earache got really mad and said, look, you just fired the founding member of your band. How, you know, why would you do that? And they said, don't worry, we're going to get another drummer. So Earache said, all right, you're going to have to record 2 songs with a new drummer and send them to us. So they recorded those 2 songs, Possess the Priest, which actually was a song that I came up with. And we were playing in 1987 with Vince and Bateman. So they stole a song from me, recorded it, and did another one called Mummified, which was a new song we were already working on anyway. and sent them to Earache, and Earache dropped them.
Mm.
So less than 6 months after they fired me, they were done. The band broke up.
It's a shame because you had such a great start with the key, and then things went sideways.
Yeah, I mean, I was against getting a vocalist, and not that it was a bad thing. It could have worked if everybody didn't get greedy. They got so greedy that the whole thing, just greed will tear anything apart. And greed is a singular thing. Greed comes from one person. And when one person is greedier than everybody else, guess what? That person's going to mess up everything. And it did.
And at the end,
So
nothing.
so they ended up with nothing.
Getting back to now,
Yeah.
that you might have limited time when it comes to promoting the new album. So what plans do you have? I mean, what's on the horizon to be visible these days?
Well, we took a lot, like you said, we did take a long time writing the album, which was good because our record contract with Profound Lore didn't have a time limit. And Chris, the owner, is a really good guy, and he's really wanting us to do what we want to do, and he doesn't push anything on us. So even though it took us a long time to write the record, he let us do that, and was fine with that, because he knew we were writing and we were going to put out a good record. At that point, we weren't going to put out an album where half the songs were just throwaway songs. Okay, we got 2 or 3 hits on here and that's it. That's not what we wanted to do. So we did take a long time writing the record and everything, but it was worth it because we got, all the songs. I like all the songs on the record. So it's none of them are like, yeah, this is a filler song. We tried not to write anything that's a filler song. Everything, we put a lot of time into writing it. So I think, it was a whole different situation. Everybody in the band contributed a lot to the record. Not just, we don't have this, is not where like the guitar player writes everything and comes in with it all recorded and says, learn this. We don't do that. It's a big collaborative effort now. The only thing I do where I do all of it is the lyrics, just because I have the ideas and I'm doing all the singing, and I have to kind of write the songs to where I can sing and play drums.
Makes sense.
Because if I sing outside of the rhythm, it's very hard for me to do that. And most people, when they write a song, the lyrics to a song, they write it to the melody of the song. I write to the rhythm of the song, which makes it a different style of writing and makes the song sound kind of different, because they go along with the rhythm more than the melody. A melody you can sing outside of the rhythm, no problem. But when you're playing drums and singing, it's hard to sing outside of what you're playing. So I ended up, my lyrics are more like chanting because they go along with the drums a lot of times.
I'm gonna
And
stop
it makes it.
for a second. I think right now you just pointed out the main difference between the key and threshold right there.
Yeah, I mean, that could be, because we yeah, you're right, for sure. I didn't think about that
It just comes
aspect of it, but
out of nowhere, but I'm like right there. You just named it.
yeah, I think you're right. I didn't ever think about that with thresholds. I mean, I think about what I do and what I did in Paradox and what I did in Unicursal and what I did on the key, and Morbid Angel too, Abominations. A lot of that was rhythmic anyway. Even when Trey would write the lyrics, he was looking at it from a chant, from the Necronomicon. A lot of stuff was chants from the Necronomicon, straight out of the book. So I was used to doing that chanting kind of vocals anyway. And then it just was easier to do it with the drums. So unconsciously, I was doing that just because it was very easy for me to sing and play like that. But I tried singing outside of the drums, and it's very difficult. And you're right, on thresholds, it does have more, the vocals are more melodic. They go more with the music rather than the rhythm. So I think you're right, for sure.
Any shows coming up anytime soon?
We're starting to talk about that now. Like I said, the main focus was writing the record. And even though it took us a while, we wanted to get the album finished, and we wanted it to sound exactly like we wanted it to sound. So it took a while, and we were recording only on the weekends. And and Jarrett Pritchard, who recorded the album, engineered it, produced it, did everything. He also runs sound for a lot of bands live. Like he does all of Tom Warrior's stuff, Celtic Frost, Triptychon. He does all that. He does 1349. He used to do Goat Whore. I think he's might still do some of their stuff sometimes, but he does a lot of live sound too, besides from studio. So he had to go on a couple of tours when we were recording the record. So we started like in October. We did a couple weekends, and then we took a couple weekends off. And then we got back in November, did a couple weekends, then did one weekend, I think, in December, and then got back in January and did a couple weekends. And then in February, we were mixing pretty much on the weekends again. And so between everybody trying to get there on the weekends, because the studio is in Orlando, which is little over an hour and a half, about an hour and a half drive from Tampa. So literally we would drive on the weekend, Saturday, go record, come back, drive back Sunday, record, and come back. And that way we kept our jobs during the week and still recorded the album. But that's another reason why it took a while to record the album. Some bands record in a week or 2 weeks right in a row and it's done. But we were lucky enough to record on the weekends and take our time. And if we didn't like something, then we could kind of go back and change it or fix it. You know, like after I did the drums in one weekend, I was able to listen to everything. And then we were able to build on that every weekend that we did go in the studio. So when you do something over time like that, you got a lot more time to sit back during the week and listen to what you did. And if you don't like this or you want to make this better, you can always do that.
That makes sense. Well, thank you for speaking with me and good luck with the new album.
All right. Great. Thanks, man.